When my stepdad looked me in the eye and said you're cut off, I actually believed him. I thought maybe I deserved it for not being grateful enough, for still calling him Mark instead of Dad, for daring to live in the house my real father built. But what I didn't know then was that Mark had just declared war in a home that was never his to begin with. He thought he could take everything from me, my dignity, my mother, even my father's legacy, but by the time it was all over, he'd lose it all. And the best part? He wouldn't even see it coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name's Ameerah, I'm 24, and until last year, I thought family loyalty meant keeping quiet to keep the peace. My dad passed away when I was 17, heart attack, sudden, no warning. He was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. After he died, the house felt empty, like every sound echoed. For years it was just me and Mom. We weren't rich, but Dad had left us comfortable, a solid home, some savings, and a kind of security that meant we didn't have to worry. Then came Mark. He met Mom at some community fundraiser. He was charming in that overconfident, movie dad sort of way, tall, too many colognes, big laugh. I didn't like him right away, but Mom was glowing again. After years of sadness, seeing her smile felt like oxygen. So when she told me she was marrying him, I bit my tongue. If he makes you happy, I said. I didn't realize I was giving permission to the man who'd turned my home into a battlefield. At first, he played the perfect gentleman, helped around the house, brought flowers, made corny jokes about being my bonus dad. But once the wedding photos came down from the mantel and my dad's picture mysteriously disappeared from the living room, I started noticing the small things. The way Mark would sigh every time I came into the room. The way Mom's laughter changed shorter, tighter, like she was careful not to upset him. He'd make comments like, "You're lucky your mom and I are keeping this place up," or "When are you planning to get your own place, kiddo?" The word kiddo made my skin crawl. I was finishing my master's degree in education, studying from home most days. He didn't like that. Adults should contribute, he'd say, tapping his credit card on the counter. I reminded him that Dad had left enough to cover my tuition, that I paid my share of groceries from my part-time job. But Mark didn't care about facts, he cared about control. He started small, locking the thermostat so I couldn't change the temperature, rearranging the kitchen because you never put things in the right place. One night, he actually changed the Wi-Fi password and told me to focus on something productive. I ended up finishing my paper at a cafe, crying into my coffee while convincing myself he was just being strict, maybe overprotective. The next morning, Mom apologized for him. She said he just wanted to teach me responsibility. I nodded, even though I felt sick. I wanted to scream, I was responsible before he ever showed up. But Mom's eyes looked so tired, and I couldn't stand to hurt her more. So I smiled, said it's fine. It wasn't fine. Every week, the house felt less like home. Mark began making me eat separately, said adults who pay bills eat first. I sat alone in my room, eating microwaved leftovers while listening to their laughter echo through the walls. I'd hear him calling me lazy or spoiled and Mom never corrected him. Sometimes she'd bring me a plate quietly, whispering, "Just keep your head down, Ameerah. He'll calm down soon." But he never did. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. I was cleaning the porch when I overheard him on the phone. His voice was low but smug. "She doesn't know a thing," he said. "The house will be in our name soon. Once she's gone, we'll finally have this place to ourselves." I froze. He paused, chuckled softly, and added, "Her father's ghost can stop haunting these walls." That line burned into my brain. I felt something snap, the kind of pain that's too sharp to even cry over. I went to my room and sat there for hours, staring at the same framed photo of my dad holding me when I was little. I used to think his arms could protect me from anything. Now, sitting in that house he built, I felt like I'd let him down. That night, Mark had guests over, some of his friends from work. He made a show of bragging about the Roberts residence, showing off my father's antique wine cabinet, even calling it his favorite part of the house. I stayed upstairs, listening to them clink glasses and laugh, pretending I didn't exist. When I came down later to grab water, one of his friends smiled politely and said, "Oh, Mark didn't mention he had a daughter." I wanted to disappear. Mark's smirk was instant. "Stepdaughter," he corrected, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's still figuring out her place." Mom's face went pale, but she didn't say a word. I mumbled an excuse and went back upstairs, feeling like I was shrinking. I kept replaying his voice in my head, "Once she's gone, we'll have this place to ourselves." I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house reminded me it wasn't safe anymore. I lay there wondering how it had come to this, how I'd gone from being my father's pride to being treated like an unwanted guest in his own home. And still, even after everything, part of me kept making excuses for them. Mom's just scared of losing another husband, I whispered to myself. Maybe Mark's just insecure, but deep down, I knew better. This wasn't insecurity, it was cruelty, and the worst part? I'd been helping him get away with it by staying silent. The next morning, I packed a small bag and decided to stay at a friend's for a few days. Before leaving, I paused at the doorway to my room. My dad's old study key hung on the wall, the one place Mark never went. I slipped it into my pocket without knowing why. Maybe I just wanted to feel close to my dad again. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Mark standing by the window, smirking. For the first time, I didn't look away. Something in me shifted that day, the quiet acceptance, the guilt, the fear, it all started to burn away. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny key in my pocket would open more than just my father's study. It would open the truth. And once I found it, there would be no going back. When I got back to the house a few days later, something felt off the moment I stepped through the door. Mom was sitting at the dining table, staring into her tea. Mark stood behind her, arms folded, that smug, self-satisfied grin glued to his face. I didn't even have time to put down my bag before he said it, his voice dripping with fake authority. "Ameerah, we need to talk." That phrase, "we need to talk," always means trouble, doesn't it? But this time, it wasn't a lecture. It was an ambush. I sat down slowly, my palms sweating. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark started pacing like a boss about to fire an employee. "You've been here too long, Ameerah. It's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. You're 24, still living off your mother's generosity. I think it's time we cut the cord." I blinked at him, not quite processing. "What do you mean by that?" He smirked, the corners of his mouth twitching like he'd rehearsed this. "I mean, you're cut off. No more free ride. No more living here rent-free. I've given you 1 week to find another place." "That's generous, considering how much you've taken advantage of our hospitality." I turned to Mom, waiting for her to say something, anything. But she just kept stirring her tea, round and round, like if she moved fast enough, she could stir herself out of the moment. "Mom," I whispered. Her eyes flicked to mine, filled with something I couldn't quite name, guilt, fear, exhaustion. Then she looked away. "Mark's right, honey," she murmured. "You need to learn independence. This is for your own good." My throat went dry. For my own good. That phrase hit like a slap. My father's house, my childhood home, and suddenly I was a burden who needed to learn independence. I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to cry in front of him. "This isn't your decision," I said, voice trembling but steady. "This is my father's house." Mark's smirk hardened into a sneer. "Your father's house? He's gone, Ameerah. This is our home now. Linda and I pay the bills, maintain the place. You just sit around, clinging to the past. You need to face reality." I looked at Mom again, desperate for her to correct him, to remind him whose name was carved on the deed. But she didn't. She just sat there, small and fragile, like the woman who raised me had been swallowed by someone else's shadow. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. "Okay," I said quietly. "If that's what you both want." Mark smiled, triumphant. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." But inside, I was falling apart. I spent that night packing, shaking with anger and disbelief. Every photo I wrapped in newspaper felt like a goodbye, not just to the house, but to the version of my mother who used to tuck me in here. When I reached my dad's old study, I hesitated. The key I'd pocketed before still felt warm against my skin. Something inside me whispered, "Go in." I unlocked the door. The air smelled like dust and cedar, like time had been standing still. His desk was exactly as he left it, neat, precise, untouched. I traced my fingers over his handwriting on old papers, his fountain pen resting beside a photo of us at the lake. My chest ached. Then, tucked beneath a stack of yellowing envelopes, I saw one marked with my name in his handwriting. "Ameerah. To be opened when you're ready." My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a small, folded document. "My dearest Ameerah, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to protect you. But I know my little girl, and I know someday, someone might try to take advantage of you or your mother. That's why I made sure you'll never lose what's rightfully yours. The house, the savings, and everything tied to my estate are under your name. It's all been transferred. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. This home is yours. Always. Love, Dad." I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the document. It was the property deed, my name printed clearly on it. I wasn't imagining things. This house was legally mine. A strange calm settled over me, like the world had stopped spinning. Every cruel word Mark had said replayed in my mind, every insult, every manipulation. The laughter downstairs, the smugness, the way he made me feel like a squatter in my own home. All of it twisted together into something sharp and cold inside my chest. He thought he had power. He thought he could take everything. He had no idea. The next morning, I came down for breakfast like nothing happened. Mark was at the table, scrolling through his phone. Mom was pouring coffee. "Did you start packing?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," I said simply. "Good girl," he muttered, the words oozing arrogance. "Once you're settled, maybe you'll appreciate what we've done for you." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I do. More than you know." He didn't notice the edge in my voice. He just smirked, satisfied, and went back to scrolling. That day, I called our family lawyer, Mr. Peterson, the same man who handled Dad's estate years ago. When I explained everything, there was a pause on the line. "Ameerah," he said finally, "I've been wondering when you'd reach out. Your father made everything very clear. Don't worry, we'll handle this properly." Hearing those words almost made me cry. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Over the next few days, I played along. I packed boxes, smiled politely, even thanked Mark for helping me move on. He was so blinded by his ego he didn't suspect a thing. But inside, I was planning carefully, quietly, with the same precision my father always had. Mr. Peterson arranged a meeting for the following Friday. Mark thought it was to finalize some paperwork about the property transfer. He even bragged about it to one of his friends over the phone, saying by next week, this house will officially be mine. I almost laughed when I heard it. That Friday morning, I wore my calmest smile. I greeted the lawyer at the door, watched Mark shake his hand like he was sealing his victory, and thought to myself, you have no idea what's coming. For months, he'd made me feel powerless. But now, for the first time, I held the cards. And I wasn't just going to play them, I was going to end the game. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And my father was finally about to have the last word. When Friday finally arrived, the air in the house felt different, charged, heavy, like the calm before a storm. I woke up before sunrise, my mind steady for the first time in months. Today wasn't about anger anymore, it was about closure, justice, peace. I made breakfast, set the table, and acted like everything was normal. Mark strutted into the kitchen in his usual smug glory, humming as he adjusted his tie. "Big day," he said, sipping his coffee. "Once the paperwork's done, things will finally be in order around here." I smiled faintly. "Yeah," I said. "In order." Mom hovered by the counter, quiet and pale. She'd been jumpy all week, asking me if I was sure I wanted to go through with everything. She didn't know what everything really meant. Mark had kept her out of most of the legal talks, pretending he was handling grown-up matters. She was still under his spell, but a small part of me hoped that by the end of the day, she'd finally see the truth. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Mark straightened his jacket, threw me a patronizing grin, and went to answer it. "Morning, Mr. Peterson," he said, shaking the lawyer's hand like they were old friends. "Glad you could make it. Let's get this property transfer finalized." Mr. Peterson nodded politely. "Of course. Shall we sit in the living room?" We all settled around the coffee table. Mark sat front and center like a man about to collect his prize. Mom sat beside him, nervous, her hands twisting in her lap. I sat quietly across from them, my fingers wrapped around a mug of tea I hadn't touched. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulling out a folder thick with documents. Mark leaned forward, practically licking his lips. "I can't tell you how relieved I'll be once everything's in my name," he said. "Been too many delays already." Mr. Peterson looked at him, expression neutral. "Yes, well, that's what I wanted to discuss. There seems to be a misunderstanding." Mark frowned. "What misunderstanding?" The lawyer glanced at me briefly before continuing. "According to the records and your late husband's will, Mrs. Roberts, this property and all assets tied to it are owned solely by Ameerah." Silence. The clock on the wall ticked once. Twice. Then Mark laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "I'm sorry, what? That can't be right." Mr. Peterson calmly flipped a page and slid the deed across the table. "It's quite right, I assure you. The documents were transferred years ago. Everything was handled by your late husband's estate. This property, the savings account, and the trust are all in Ameerah's name." Mark's smirk shattered. That's impossible. I've been paying bills, repairs, this is our home. I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. No, Mark. It's my father's home. He built it for us. You were just living here. His face turned crimson. You little. He cut himself off, shooting a desperate look at Mom. Linda, tell him. Tell this man there's been some mistake. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Her eyes darted between the lawyer, Mark, and me. Mark, she whispered, is this true? He slammed his fist on the table. Of course it's not true. She's manipulating you. She probably forged something. Mr. Peterson's voice stayed level. All documents are original and legally verified. Your late husband was meticulous with his records. He clearly wanted to ensure Ameerah's security. Mark's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists, and for a second, I saw something dark flicker in his eyes. The same look he'd get when he thought no one was watching, the kind of rage that came from losing control. I stood slowly, meeting his glare head-on. You've treated me like a stranger in my own home. You made me believe I didn't belong here. But you were the guest, Mark, not me. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You think you can just throw me out? Yes, I said simply. Actually, I can. The lawyer closed the folder. Legally speaking, Mr. Roberts, you have no claim to this property. You'll need to vacate immediately. Any further attempts to contest ownership could result in legal action. Mark shot to his feet, eyes wild. This is ridiculous. You think you can humiliate me like this? After everything I've done for this family. I laughed softly, though my chest was shaking. Done for this family? You used us. You made my mother believe she needed you, and you made me believe I was worthless. But you forgot one thing: my father didn't raise a fool. Mom started crying quietly. Mark, you lied to me, didn't you? He turned to her, his anger melting into desperate pleading. Linda, baby, you know how lawyers twist things. She's turning you against me. Enough, she snapped, louder than I'd ever heard her. The sound froze him mid-sentence. Tears streaked down her face, but her voice was steady. Get out, Mark. Just get out. He stared at her, stunned, like he couldn't believe she'd chosen me over him. Then his expression hardened. You'll regret this, he spat, grabbing his coat. Both of you. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The silence that followed felt like the first real breath of air I'd taken in months. Mom sank into the couch, shaking. I sat beside her and took her hand. For a long time, we didn't speak. Then she whispered, he fooled me, Ameerah. I wanted to believe someone could love me again. I squeezed her hand. He didn't fool you, Mom. He preyed on you. But it's over now. She nodded slowly, tears falling freely. Your father would have been proud of you. That broke me a little. I smiled through my tears. I hope so. Mr. Peterson packed up his briefcase, gave me a knowing look, and quietly excused himself. The sound of the front door closing behind him felt like the end of a chapter. Later that evening, I walked through the house in silence. Every room felt lighter, brighter, like the air itself had been waiting for him to leave. I paused in my dad's study, touching the desk where it had all started: the letter, the deed, the truth. I whispered, we did it, Dad. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel powerless. I felt whole. As I stood there, the sunset poured through the window, painting the walls gold. And I realized something: revenge hadn't been the point at all. It wasn't about humiliating Mark or even proving him wrong. It was about reclaiming what he tried to take from me: my peace, my strength, my voice. I closed the door to the study and smiled. The house was quiet now, just the way it used to be. And as I looked around the home my father built, I finally felt what I'd been craving all along: freedom. Sometimes karma doesn't come in thunder or fire. Sometimes it walks through the front door in a suit, carrying the paperwork your enemies never bothered to read.